Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast and the founder at FamilyOffice Association. Well, among the most common comments I get out of all the important things to mention to me, of course, is, Angelo, do you wear the same black shirt all the time? Well, one, I have on a white shirt today, a white linen shirt, I might add. And by the way, black is my favorite color. I got about 11 of those shirts with different buttons, I might add. So I promise you it's not the same one. Of course, that's the most important thing to get out of the way. Today, we have a really great session. Andrew Coors on growing up in the Coors family and the future of energy. Now that sounds, you thought I was probably going to say beer or something like that. We may talk a little bit about that. Who doesn't love beer? I do. But the future of energy, and Andrew's really one of the amazing leading thinkers. Really excited to have him on. Andrew Coors, Coors family member and the founder of Steelhead Composites. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Angelo. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited. Why don't we get right to it? So you grew up in an iconic, I was going to say American, but really an international family of generational success. I'm assuming that does come with some advantages. Your Maslow needs of hierarchy are quote unquote covered, but I've been doing this a long time. And I know there's also challenges and disadvantages that come with a family brand, reputation, and expectations. If you could give to our audience, who I'm sure would be interested, a little bit of context behind that.
Well, as you're involved with family offices, they're inherently complicated because family's complicated, money's complicated. And if you have a family business associated with that family office, you have the trifecta of internal politics. In our family, it goes back to 1873, my great-great-grandfather starting the Coors Brewery. So I'm fifth generation. There's about 275 of us. And with that comes the dilution of control as well as some of the dilution of the value of the family enterprises. But it was but there are definite benefits that are associated with that, as you mentioned. You know, there were some financial rewards of being part of a family business that has been around for as long as Coors Brewery and now Coors Brewery and Coors Tech have been alive.
Oh, for sure. You know, the family has carried on a wonderful entrepreneurial tradition and really has done amazing things as a family, including in philanthropy. And still, as we're going to talk about eventually with you, there still is definitely an entrepreneurial spirit. But yes, as discussed there, again, I've been doing this a long, long time. Many of you know me simply from the podcast, but I guess my day job is having founded and being the CEO of a global organization called FamilyOffice Association. And yeah, there's all the things you mentioned, from branding to expectations to image to having a brand and name to hold up, to wanting to make your own mark in the world. And sometimes, and I know others may not understand this, sometimes it helps to have a family brand and name, and sometimes it's a detriment. It is absolutely not always a positive, but maybe we'll save that for a little bit later. At what age did you feel you understood? I'm almost chuckling because my question's a stupid one. At what age did you feel you understood family dynamics? I'm assuming the answer is that's never completely understood and it changes all the time. But maybe a little more importantly, when did you realize, oh, I'm really not in a traditional family, I'm in a generational family of wealth? Was that at like 5, 10, 15?
It was quite young, and it's a little nuanced as well, because early on, my father wasn't involved with the family businesses at all. So I had a name that was well known and lived locally to where the brewery was. So my name was associated with a prosperity that I did not grow up with in my direct family. So I had the advantage and disadvantage of everywhere I went. People were like, "Oh, so you're part of that family," and and that has carried on. I think it's decreased over time with the brewery going public and becoming a large multinational publicly traded corporation. So, but growing up, it was still a privately held company that was one of the largest employers in the area that I was born. Mm-hmm. So, preschool and grade school, my name resonated with the population of, oh, my dad works for you or my mom works for you, and that carries some, like you mentioned, some pros and cons of being in a family business. When the family business is named after a last name,
and I'm assuming how I started my question meant to be only a little tongue in cheek, understanding family dynamics. I'm assuming in my joking answer is probably pretty accurate. You never completely understand because it adapts all the time.
Well, and that is the right answer. I still don't know family dynamics, and the family is large enough that I don't think you ever really completely do. And I've been on the inside a little bit and on the outside for most of my life. But the little time that I was on the inside of the family business, I didn't fully understand the dynamics, and I still don't. And the other complexity too is being Generation 5. There are dynamics that have occurred in generations that no longer exist. Yeah. They get passed down through the tribal knowledge, if you will, unspoken rules that maybe my great grandfather had that weren't passed on to me, and some sacred things. And family is complicated.
Oh, for sure. And actually, going back to even your great grandfather's roots and even what you're doing, which we'll get to, I'm always intrigued as I interview entrepreneurs. Is that learned? Are people born with a certain trait? It's probably a little bit of a combination. I'm going to say more learned, but I'm going to add a third one to the mix. Kind of neither. It's the surroundings. Like, who are your 5 closest contacts? Who's your mentors? Were you supported when you were growing up? Were you allowed to fail and it was encouraged that you took the effort? Would you say it's a combination of factors that make an entrepreneur successful?
Well, so in my great grandfather's instance, it was the failure of his mining career. He left the old world to come to the U.S. in the 1870s, and then moved to Colorado in the search of finding gold. But he came without knowing how to mine, but he knew how to make beer. So it was the failure of the mining enterprise, and then this desperation of, okay, I need to do something, and the only thing I know how to really do is make beer, and there's a lot of thirsty miners. So why not start a brewery downstream of the mines, which is where the brewery is today. The iconic largest single site brewery in the world, at the bottom of Clear Creek, and up Clear Creek is where many of the mines at that time existed. For me, I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I set out to, I wanted to make something. My background is finance, but I got a little tired of the finance thing, and I wanted to make something, and started a manufacturing company, never with the intention of it really being what it's become and what it will become. But for me, it was not that I took a class in entrepreneurship and said I want to start a business. It just the opportunity arose, and to start a company, and I did it. And so I don't really consider myself an entrepreneur, just maybe more of an opportunist.
I'm going back to a little bit, probably childhood and teenage years. And I've been thinking as I interview many family members, and I learned so much, that often parents, I think well-meaning, but parents, teachers, elders often stifle and discourage children. Maybe when you were younger, you wanted to be a musician. Maybe you wanted to do something in the creative end, but like, no, there's no career in that. When we're young, we're bushy-tailed and wild-eyed. We think that we could basically do anything. And maybe the reality is the earlier we learn we can't, maybe that is better. But something Pollyanna in my mind is no, I think it's good to allow people to try, to fail, to bounce back, to be resilient. And when they're young and they still have time on their side, why do we stifle them?
That's a very good point. And that's something that I think is one of the challenges of all family offices, especially as wealth grows. You want your children to succeed, but if you have too much of a safety net, there's no incentive to go out and try things. I was fortunate with my father. He would let me do anything I wanted. The only thing he encouraged me not to do is to try to work in the family enterprises. And most of my career, I heeded that advice. And his thought was, that there are the complexities, the dynamics, and there's also this view of, if you are working for somebody else's family and you're successful on your own, you will be seen as a success. But if you're working for your own family and you're successful, there was no way to dissect whether your success was due to the privilege and perks of being part of the family or your own ability. And I think that was wise of him to have me cut my teeth and develop a modicum of success without any family involvement whatsoever. The family invited me to come participate in some things not until 2011. So much of my life was completely outside the fold of what the family was up to.
And maybe in general from internally with your family, but maybe experiences being in the world of finance and even what you're doing now and having met many families, and maybe a little personal, but I'm assuming with, again, almost 300 family members, it's complex. I'm assuming there's one or multiple branches with the family office, maybe more formally than others. My question is, especially generationally, the family becomes more removed from the operations of the family office. They hire quote unquote non-family professionals because that's the thing to do, which might be right or might be wrong. But now they're not, I mean, they may go to one or two meetings a year and stamp off on certain things, but your experience, whether in Coors or other families that you know, how active is the family in investing in decision-making, or is it almost always given to those that run the family office that are likely not family members?
I think that the latter is more common. Having the professional family office manager, I see that more and more often. The Coors family, interestingly, does not have a family office. They don't like that word. They never wanted a family office. The reason I heard was, we're not investors, we're owner operators. And so that there's this vision of, we can do it all ourselves. We don't need to do diversification or investments. We're going to have 100% ownership or majority ownership of what we do, and family members will run those entities. And that's the way that they did it. And I think it's quite unique. Whether or not it's the right thing to do is, that's up in the air. But that's different than I think most families that you would come across in your family office association in terms of vision. But it was the genesis of giving me some of the capability of going out and starting my own thing. If we're owner operators, I'll go own and operate something.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not that uncommon, although maybe 5 generations in, it's a little bit more unique. You see that more commonly in Europe and other parts of the world. You can make the argument the way to get rich is to be very concentrated, to mitigate risk, but to be concentrated. And if a family enterprise is growing at whatever, 20, 30% a year, and you have complete transparency, know all the skeletons, know how to mitigate risk, that may be better, arguably, than being overly diversified. That's debatable, but it's something that is worthy of being put on the table and discussed. You kind of lead me to my next question that you hinted at. What made you want to make your mark on the world? And I guess inherently, seeing the success of a private company led you more down that route, although I'd like to hear about your background in finance as well.
I think it was the what led me down the route was because I was in money management during the Great Recession, and we had been quite successful up until the recession, and then all of a sudden I was the villain, and I wasn't getting credit for the wins of the years past. I was getting blamed for the markets of that day, and I was that's when I decided that I wanted to try making something that was more permanent than a track record, because your track record in finance is only as good as your last trade, but making something that is a little more longevity. So when I was given the opportunity to participate in the Coors family businesses as an operator and working in manufacturing, and this was on the ceramic side at Coors Tech, that really resonated with me. Making, and honestly, I love it. It's probably the hardest way of making money out there is actually making something, but you can look around and you can touch and feel what you've done. And I didn't have that in finance, although the money was a lot better in finance. The fulfillment in having a tangible product that you're generating for your career just was more close to my heart.
And in terms of being in the world of finance, did you felt you had was that something your parents and others, even at a younger age, taught you the basics of savings, of money? It's not like all of a sudden at 13, yeah, let me explain to me what a hedge fund is, although that may not necessarily be the worst thing in the world. Was it internally with the family? Was it not until college? Was it simply your self-interest in discipline and researching and understanding finance on your own, or a combination of all that?
It just was, as I think most people are, you kind of end up where you are, and how you got there. You can, in hindsight, go back and say, this is how it happened. But it wasn't that there was any great drive for me to get into finance. When I graduated from my undergrad, before I went to go do my PhD work in economics, I took my LSATs, my GMATs, and my GREs all the same week. I didn't know what direction I wanted to go. Did I want to go into law? Did I want to go into social studies? Did I want to go into business? And then, the life unfolds, and everything's an opportunity, and some end up being good ones and some being poor, but you just kind of end up where you are. And you can look back and I can point to those key decisions, but at the time I didn't know those were the binary that put me on a totally different track.
And what did you major in college?
Economics.
And if you don't mind me asking, where did you go to school?
I did my undergraduate at Colorado State, and then my graduate work at University of California, San Diego.
Sure. So I guess a question I would have on that, not to disparage professors in college, I think there's getting away from home, becoming independent of parents, of interacting with others from different backgrounds. There's tremendous value in college. I get it. And yes, if you want to be a doctor or a scientist, then it becomes even more valuable from an educational perspective. But things are changing. The world of education tech, we see the advancements of even YouTube and other platforms to learn at our own pace. Mm-hmm. I suppose I do want to go back to the question, how valuable from an educational perspective was college to you? What would be your number one takeaway from that perspective, being in college and now looking at it from a rear view mirror?
I don't know. I don't really, I mean,
What says that?
I think that there's a lot you learn in college. It's not tangible
Right.
stuff you're learning in classes. And that's probably the stuff that molded me and shaped me and taught me. In terms of my coursework, you know, other than having an opinion on economics that some people may be interested in, may not, for my day job, it doesn't do me really anything. You know, that's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went to learn things that were important in textbooks, but have no real ramifications for running a manufacturing company or a clean tech company or making a product that is like we're making today. So, but would there have been an education that would have been more aligned to what I'm doing right now? Probably not. I don't think that having a degree in entrepreneurship makes you a better entrepreneur, as we were talking about earlier.
Right.
I feel like I'm an engineer and I can hold my own with the engineers, though I don't have an engineering degree. I think that's to your point that you can learn a lot by alternative ways of educating yourself, either being in the field or through YouTube. But it is funny you mentioned the YouTube is when I did start Steelhead, one of the first things we did is we removed all paper training for employees, all work instructions that are posted by the machines, and trained the operators via video, because it's the best way to learn. You know, if your washing machine is broken, you don't pull out the Kenmore booklet. No, you Google your Kenmore washing machine broken and see a video and you fix it yourself.
For sure. There's actually someone, I believe, who's on now that mentioned they fixed their fence in the backyard via watching a YouTube video about how to do the pour of cement, properly structure, measure. So yeah, you can learn a lot. I know my audience hears me mention that and they think I'm disparaging schools. That's not the case. There are advantages. And I think less of it for most professions is actually the educational part. And I've said before, I'll say it again and keep on getting in trouble. Do schools like Harvard really create winners, or via SAT scores and who they are, do they really pick them? And they're already going to be more likely than not to be successful, especially when they're added to that network of peers and alumni. But I do get a little off track. What led you to energy and specifically hydrogen?
So this is an example of being just at the right place at the right time. So when we started Steelhead, we had no idea that our products would be relevant for hydrogen, nor do we have any idea that this energy transition, which has really taken hold over the last 18 months, would occur, and that we would have a position in the front seat in driving this one of the key elements of this energy transition. We had a customer that needed a lightweight hydraulic component, so that's why we started Steelhead. It was initially just going to be a one-trick pony with one or two customers, a small company that's meeting a very unique, very niche need. We've had to evolve since then, but in addressing our initial market, we got really good at storing high pressures in demanding environments and dealing with really tough regulatory environments. So that when we started seeing this hydrogen on the horizon about 4 years ago, we were able to pivot our current product portfolio at the time into something that works for storing energy in the form of hydrogen. And that put us gave us the critical element of being on the lead for this really amazing transition that now you can't look at a newspaper and not see an article about hydrogen somewhere in some application as a key element of decarbonization.
Very true. And like you said, you kind of fell into it and really saw the opportunity and ran with it, which I suppose you already answered it from that perspective. But I would say hydrogen, what we're seeing going on in energy now, from oil prices to natural gas to the emergence of quote unquote clean energy. I could go on and on. But back to hydrogen, why now? What are the challenges that you're facing?
That's a good question, because had we started the company to address hydrogen storage, I mean, the first fuel cell was in the 1800s. The term hydrogen economy was coined in 1970. So there were fortunes in hydrogen made and lost around the dot-com era. So the view that we had, which was a pretty consensus view, is hydrogen, yeah, maybe someday. Maybe 5 years out, maybe 10 years out. But a few things have happened over the last really 18 months. I would say that the key thing that really changed this was the European New Deal, which was July of last year during COVID, where they had announced a commitment for removing all dependence on petroleum by 2050, but doing so using hydrogen as a key energy carrier and investing $400 billion between now and 2030. And that caused a shock to the system of, wait, okay, so this isn't just R&D money. This is real money and a real commitment by the European Union to change the way that they're powering their society. And following that, there have been South Korea has had a similar type of mandate with what they're calling the hydrogen wave, $100 billion investing in hydrogen there by their 7 largest companies. And then projects in the Middle East that are such as the Neom, which is in Saudi Arabia, this $500 billion project to have a completely zero emission, not just carbon neutral, but zero emission industrial manufacturing city, starting from the ground up. And the acknowledgement that they can't do that without having an energy carrier like hydrogen. So these dominoes have been falling, and it's now happening in a real way. Over the last year, we've had, at last count, 1,128 incoming requests for hydrogen storage across 36 countries.
Wow.
So this is something that is taking hold, and has started taking hold. But I really blame it on the Europeans, and in a good way. The Japanese have been at it for a while. The Chinese have been at it for a while. But it was until Europe had this deal that came out, this mandate. I think the world was viewing it as batteries versus hydrogen, and that's transitioned to this view of you need batteries, hydrogen, solar, and wind if we're going to stop burning fossil fuels for our power and mobility needs.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I was going to bring up. I thought it might have been a little bit of a stretch, but I find it fascinating. And that's the Project Neom, N-E-O-M, at least as I pronounce it, in Saudi Arabia. You gave a little bit of a hint, but if you could talk about how actually expansive and amazing it actually is. And I've been fascinated by the growth of new territories, cities, smart cities, what the metaverse could potentially mean as a part of all of this. And a building block is going to be, quote unquote, a clean, quote unquote, city. If you could even expand a little more, if you don't mind, about this like amazing project that probably so few people in America and around the world even know about.
It really is amazing. It's really ambitious. And I would recommend anybody check out their website. It's neom.com. It just went live about 3 weeks ago. They did the ribbon cutting. I was privileged to be there on the Neom ground for the ribbon cutting of what's called Oxagon, which is the new, used to be called Neom Industrial City. So I got to be part of this really amazing new vision. And I'm going to say something that'll sound very like brash almost, but it gave me an enthusiasm, not just for business, but for that there are people out there that are willing to have such an amazing, monumental vision that will really save our species. Because this is not an incremental change. This is not a one foot in front of the other. This is a whole regime change to showcase the ability of us as a collective to relook at how we make things and how we live and how we interact with others. So I left with an optimism on humanity that I hadn't really had for a while. And during COVID, you know, I think there's, at least I can speak personally, I've been feeling a little pessimistic about the human condition. And so learning more about Neom and being there, you know, got me thinking that things may not be as bad as they sometimes feel.
Yes, I do recommend people go to the website. It was pretty amazing when I looked into it just a couple of days ago. On hydrogen, I guess I could make a bold statement. I don't know if I completely believe in it because I maybe have some other interest, which we'll get to a little later. But is this the biggest opportunity of the century?
So according to Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, hydrogen is a $11 to $12 trillion opportunity and the best investment opportunity since the semiconductor. Their words, not mine.
Wow. Wow. No, that's, I mean, their words carry some respect. I know this is almost going to sound rudimentary, but I don't want to make any assumptions. Explain a little bit, is hydrogen an element? Is it the most common element in the universe? And has a big problem simply been the complexities of storing it, and how is that being addressed?
So hydrogen is the smallest element on the periodic table. It's teeny, but it is the most abundant element in the universe.
Yes.
It has a codependency issue. It does not like being just hydrogen. It likes combining with other things. Most notorious, it combines with carbon and creates hydrocarbons. So fossil fuels are hydrogen carriers. And that hydrogen has quite a bit of potential energy in it. And the way we release it is by burning. And that problem is you get the energy, but you also get that carbon is let free, combines with an oxygen, creates CO2. Plus you get other things just by the combustion process. So we power our cars on hydrogen, just not in the right way, or the way that is best for the environment. Maybe it's a better way to say it. But you can have hydrogen combined with oxygen, and that creates water, H2O, or hydrogen combines with nitrogen, which we do often synthetically to make ammonia, so fertilizer. So those are the three main, hydrogen carriers that we're interested in: water, fossil fuels, or ammonia. We can talk a little bit about ammonia later. It's just it's one of the other green type of fuels, possibly green type of fuels. But the main reason that we're not using hydrogen in its pure state is that it's expensive to break it apart, particularly from water. Water is a very stable element, and breaking that or molecule, and breaking apart that hydrogen from the oxygen requires electricity. So that's been the real issue with hydrogen, is why would you break it apart from water when you can have it already usable combined with carbon? And there are two things that have really changed that. One is this global political or global view of removing our dependence on petroleum petroleum products for our power needs, either for environmental reasons or geopolitical reasons, which are not trivial and are increasing. You see that what has happened in Europe over the last year, with the volatility of their fuel prices has done nothing but encourage them to go to other energy carriers such as hydrogen. But the other one is solar in particular, but solar and wind. As you add more and more to the grid, you have this issue of this intermittency, where you have too much energy being created at certain points of the day and none at other points of the day. So how do you smooth that out, either through the day or seasonally, interseasonally? And a good way to do that is because when the sun is shining, if you have lots of solar, you end up with excess power. And the grid doesn't know what to do with excess power. And there's really no way to store it. The best way to store it is pumped hydro. So you take your solar power and you pump water back up into a reservoir so that you can reuse that right into the turbine. But the second best way to store that energy is break apart water and store the hydrogen. And that's really what is the shift is. What do we do with as we add more and more renewables, and how do we have a more stable grid, which is an incredibly important topic, with the issues in California and Texas, and the ones in the Northeast with some of the brownouts earlier. The grid needs to be stabilized, and we're adding more solar. We're not adding any more coal. We got to store the energy somehow, and hydrogen's the best answer.
No, that gets right to it. When you hear about certain things from an investing perspective, you hear picks and shovels. What would be picks and shovels investment in what's going on in the world of hydrogen?
So my version of picks and shovels is a beer for the gold miners, I guess. Our earlier thing. So what we're doing at Steelhead is the epitome of picks and shovels. We're at that storage side of it, and there are hundreds of companies that are coming out, probably 10 a day. They're doing different types of hydrogen generation, new electrolysis, and there are dozens of companies that are coming up with new fuel cell technology. But the storage side is really, that's where we're the picks and shovels. No one really talks about it. It's a foregone conclusion of, yeah, we have to store the hydrogen. We make it, compress it, store it, and use it. But the storage is the most difficult from a regulatory aspect part of this equation. So the fact that we've been successful, one of only a few companies globally that's successful in having certified deployed hydrogen storage solutions in a highly regulated environment, makes me feel like we're really that picks and shovels side of things, where every one of these hydrogen installations will need some type of storage, and they come to us for that. As I mentioned, over 1,000 inbound inquiries, totally unexpected, by the way. If I only wish that I could have, known of this ahead of time, I would have had been more ready for it. But it's, but there's a lot of elements of this hydrogen transition that are still very, very early. This is still kind of a cottage industry, and then overnight, so to say, it's expected to turn into a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And there's going to be some growing pains, but it's allowed someone like us, a 40-person company in Colorado, to be in a leadership position for an entire energy transition.
No, that's fantastic. So I come at this with very little knowledge, but I think of maybe cars and Tesla and batteries and quote unquote clean tech. I don't quite know if it's as clean as people say it is, because you got to do the mining and all that, but we'll put that a little bit to a side for a second before I get in more trouble than I already get into. How does hydrogen play into the future of cars and fuel, or it doesn't?
So that's a very heated question, a
Yep.
very controversial question of, you know, batteries versus hydrogen. But we can look at it from the two sides, where a very small vehicle, there's really no advantage of going to hydrogen, because hydrogen it's better weight wise, and it's better refilling time and better cost wise, but it's more complicated, and it's less round trip efficiency than batteries. It also doesn't load follow very well. So if you've got a very small vehicle, that's battery only. But a very large vehicle, like a Class 8 truck, I know people have done battery electric Class 8 trucks, but you end up just with this inability to carry any cargo because your entire vehicle is the battery. So hydrogen will dominate on the Class 8 side, or the large truck side. I can say the same thing for maritime, where the larger the vehicle, the more, the longer the duty cycle, those need hydrogen. There's advantages and disadvantages to both technologies, and it's not an either or. It's a, what is the right technology for the use case that makes the most sense? And I have my theories of where that is, but there's a lot of really great projects out there that are demonstrating both battery and hydrogen solutions, and some of them will end up being very successful, I think.
I could only imagine. Let's see if I get this next question right. And we don't want to make it too technical, but somewhat intrigued by clean, is it brown natural gas, and remove that, what, blue hydrolysis, electrified in water, and now it's green. How could you make sense of what I just said? And where's the logic from a hydrogen perspective?
I'm laughing because the coloring of hydrogen.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Which we're doing, but we don't do that when you're powering your Tesla. You don't know what color the electrons are. You know, did they come from coal, from nuclear, from wind, from solar? From you hope that your Tesla is being powered by the greenest and cleanest of them all, but you kind of just, you know, don't really think about it. But hydrogen has been colored, and most of the discussions that you hear about and read about are about green hydrogen. So green hydrogen, and let me just say something that's probably obvious to everybody. Hydrogen is not colored, right? You can't tell the difference between how that hydrogen was generated, but we in the industry or the media or the marketplace have colored them based on how they're generated. So green is through breaking apart water through electrolysis using solar or wind or other renewables. So that's what most of the airtime is about. It's the highest social acceptance, but it's also still very, very expensive compared to other hydrogen colors. Quickly going through them, you know, blue hydrogen, which would be breaking apart a hydrocarbon, usually methane, natural gas, and then sequestering the CO2 so that the CO2 is not allowed into the atmosphere. That's your blue, which is socially almost as good as green, but you're using a fossil fuel, so maybe not. Then there's grays and browns and pinks that are, pink is nuclear. The grays and the browns are using other hydrocarbons and not sequestering the CO2. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting paradigm where you do have labels, a single element getting different colored labels and different views on the social ramifications of each.
Yes, how true. I'll give a little disclaimer before we go into our final couple of minutes and hear a little more about Steelhead and how qualified investors potentially could become active and invest. Everyone, this is for educational, and I would probably more so say entertainment purposes. It's a specific opinion at this given point in time, and things change, conditions change, opinions change. When you invest, you should be very careful. You could always lose money, potentially lose a lot of money. You need to understand your time horizon, your risk tolerance, and probably have a level of diversity in terms of what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you need to do your own diligence and make your own decisions, because again, when you invest, you can lose money. Now, for a significant family or a family office that wants to be active in the world of energy, they probably know how to do that in various other aspects of energy, including traditionally oil. But if they want to be involved in something like hydrogen, they're probably not going to have internal experts per se on it. They're probably going to look to get involved with an organization or whatever, a GPLP structure like yours, and become more of a passive investor, perhaps until they get more familiarity. In maybe 2 or 3 minutes, explain a little bit about what you're doing at Steelhead Composites.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So Steelhead, we have found ourselves making these hydrogen storage solutions. And we do all the designing, the engineering, the manufacturing, the testing, the certification of these vessels that use advanced materials. So we reinforce a plastic or aluminum cylinder with carbon fiber in a highly automated process. I'd love to show it to anybody that's in Colorado. It's really cool watching these products unfold that really are the epitome of advanced manufacturing for a clean product. And yeah, so early last year, so up until now, as a 5th generation member, I had the fortunateness from my family to have the ability to bootstrap the company. But last year, the opportunity started getting bigger than my checkbook would accommodate. And I still have put a tremendous amount of my own money as a percentage of my total assets into Steelhead, but I did start raising money from qualified investors at the beginning of last year, and have continued doing so that share the costs of really the deploying these products, in the hope that we share some of the benefits of being a thought leader in hydrogen storage and a product leader. So that's it in a nutshell.
And for those that have an interest, again, assuming they do their own diligence and they're qualified to potentially be an LP, I don't know if they need to be a qualified purchaser in your case, probably at least an accredited investor, and need to go through a bit of a process. But for those that are interested, how could they learn more, and how could they reach out to you or someone from your team?
So we're pretty active on LinkedIn. Sending me an email is a great way to get in touch with me. I'm reasonably responsive, probably not as much as I should be. We're trying to get better at that, but things are good in our little business right now. Check out the website and read some of the opinions online about hydrogen and what is it going to impact the economy as much as some researchers say. And then,
what's the website URL?
So Steelhead Composites is the company. So it's www.steelheadcomposites.com, or you can just Google Steelhead Composites, and then you'll see our product offering, some videos on how we manufacture these things, and information about the testing, the certification, and some of our customers.
And you also mentioned you're on LinkedIn as Andrew Coors, so someone could connect with you and DM you through LinkedIn as well?
That's always a great way to get in touch with me. Yeah.
I agree. It is convenient. Well, that has been very helpful. I'm going to ask a final 1 or 2 questions that are going to seem a little out there, but they somewhat tie in, I think, I promise. And that is going to be look at what we have going on around the world now. Inflation is raging. It's way higher than for especially wealthy families that spend a lot on resources and want to buy more expensive, quote unquote, resources. It's a hell of a lot more than 6 or 7%. If they invest too conservatively over time, maybe decades and generations, the purchasing power gets decimated. And that's a little bit of what I was hinting at earlier. with who's in charge of the investments for the family now. How much freedoms do they have? Are they keeping up with how the world is changing? And I would think they're going to need to be active in certain things that are, I don't know if I'd use the word moonshots, but that are probably more aggressive plays. Things in energy like hydrogen. I could make the argument for VC. And my audience knows this verbiage will always come up. Yeah, probably crypto and digital assets as well. Knowing what you know about family history and entrepreneurship, broadly about family enterprises and about families of wealth and success, do you find, without being self-serving, of course, that they should be looking for a part of their portfolio? I don't know, maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's more. In your case, it's probably 80% plus. But should they be looking at some of the things that I'm talking about, from hydrogen plays to crypto and digital assets to maybe through VC, where they could get a combination of what I just said, but maybe AI and what's going on there? Do you think that's valuable for families to maintain their purchasing power?
I think it's critical. And we're at an interesting time right now where, yes, inflation is high, but bond yields, so debt instruments are yielding basically nothing. So
yeah, less than nothing, all in taxes and inflation.
In a traditional, stock and bond portfolio, your stocks are arguably overvalued, and your bonds aren't yielding anything, but your purchasing power is decreasing on a day in and day out basis. So where do you invest outside of those? And I think that's what you were saying. And
yes,
I wish I knew more about the digital assets and cryptocurrency. I learned it from my son, because that's
that's probably the best way. And we also have a friend in Brian Hayward that knows a thing or two.
Exactly. Yeah, he helps me out as well.
Yeah,
but so outside of that, I look at it, and this might sound self-serving, that my best investment opportunity across my portfolio is the company that I'm running, because I know everything about it. I know where the skeletons are, I know where the opportunities are, and I think it makes the most economic sense looking across any set of diversified opportunities. But I think families can do the same thing, right? If you know what you know, and investing in something that you can really see and feel and touch is great. But even VC, I think some of the valuations in VC have gotten into la la land.
Right.
So this is a hard time to be an investor, I'd say, unless you can find some reasonable valuations and some opportunities that will cash flow pretty nicely. And so I personally like the space that's more mature than VC, but less mature than private equity. That space in between where valuations still seem to be pretty reasonable.
Oh, completely agree. Those are very good points, Andrew. As we're heading to a close, everyone, it really has been a pleasure to have Andrew Coors on of Steelhead Composites and discussing a little bit about family history, of course, with the Coors family, a little bit about family offices and investing, and hopefully more than a little bit about the unique opportunity in energy, specifically hydrogen, and specifically what Andrew's doing. We hope you all found it very valuable. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast. We're Family Office on YouTube, very active on social media, including Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And again, you could find me either as my name, you'll find it, or company name, or the Angelo Robles podcast. I might be a little trickier on Instagram, which is actually a pretty big platform for me. I don't know why I keep on changing the name, but to show my interest in digital assets of the metaverse, I happen to be Angelo Robles Meta, META, on Instagram. Check us out at FamilyOfficeAssociation.com, a membership organization dedicated to families of wealth, where we bring together both digital and in-person events and lots of connectivity and resources and content dedicated to those that are interested. On that note, everyone, I do appreciate it. Andrew, you've been a wonderful guest. I look forward to one day meeting you in person. Thank you to our live audience and those that will watch and hear on one of the various platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever it might be. Again, everyone, and Andrew Coors, thank you so much for your time.